Remember Sonic Unleashed? Nope, not that Unleashed. Not that one either. This one. When I was a kid, I had such an odd fascination with this game. I remember scrolling YouTube on my iPod Touch, back when the app looked like this, and coming across a gameplay video of it. I think it was this one. I instantly wanted to get my hands on it, but the more I looked into it, the more I began to realize that just wasn't happening. This was a version of the game that was exclusive to Java and BlackBerry phones, something I didn't have as a 9-year-old. So out of nowhere, I was thinking about this version of the game again recently, and I thought, wait, why don't I finally get around to trying this? Because now you could just emulate them on hardware far more powerful than these phones ever were. So I decided to play it, and it was an interesting experience. Don't get me wrong, it's really neat that this even exists at all, and I can't be too harsh on it given the time that it was released and the platform it was on. But man, it gets rough. Also, before I get into the game itself, I wanted to cover the 3 different versions of Unleashed Mobile real quick. It's not that deep or anything, but I thought I'd mention these anyway. There's 3 distinct versions with a bunch of different resolutions depending on the phone you had. There's a low-end version, a mid-end version, and a high-end version. Some versions of the game, mainly the low-end versions, have completely different level design, likely to accommodate for the worst specs. Aside from that, lower-end versions have less detail, while higher-end versions have much more detail, as you would expect. The version I ended up playing for this video was one of the variants of the high-end version, specifically the one that ran at 240 by 320. I kind of wish I ended up playing the highest quality version, since I've always knew it existed, I just forgot about it when I went to play it. Anyway, let's take a look at this relatively unknown version of Unleashed. The story in this version kind of follows Unleashed. Dialogue ends up being ripped right from the original script, but where events happen are just completely different, and certain characters don't show up in this version. After the opening cutscene, the game starts in Chunan, and characters like Tails, Amy, or Professor Pickle don't show up at all. Dark Gaia doesn't even show up either. He's only mentioned despite being one of the main antagonists of the game. Cutting the story down like this makes sense, it's just a little odd that they don't at least have Tails in there somewhere. It's pretty much just Sonic and Chip going across the world, gathering the Chaos Emeralds as they do in the console version. The game ends in Missouri with a fight against one of Eggman's mechs, and then you get this really cheesy speech at the end, and there's really not much beyond that. Unleashed Mobile basically plays like a lost Sonic Rush game for the most part, which makes sense. The game is split between Sonic and the Werehog like the main game, Sonic having the boost gameplay and the Werehog having no boost, basic combat, and overall being more platform heavy. Chunan, Apotos, Begonia, and Missouri are the only continents out of the 9 total from the original game to show up here, and they're split between 2 acts and a boss. Chunan being the only exception because it has 3 acts and no boss. Anyway, this game is pure jank. If you aren't fighting with the input delay, then you're fighting with the game's physics that are just so inconsistent. Again, it's a mobile game from 2008, but you can just tell that Sonic gameplay, especially the boost formula, doesn't work too well here with how limited mobile devices and games from this era were. The jump doesn't know when to actually work properly either, and that is painful with how platform heavy things get. Sometimes it'll send you far enough, other times it won't, and sometimes it just decides to send you like 6 feet past the platform, resulting in your death because for some reason most spikes in this game instantly kill you. You notice it the most with the Werehog stages, obviously because they're more platform heavy. They also loved putting these sections with vines swinging across instant death spikes in most of the levels, and these caused several game overs throughout because the game just didn't know when it felt like working properly. Jumping off of a vine sometimes works fine, and then other times it just sends me to my death, and it's just whatever the game feels like doing at that moment. At first I thought it was just me controlling the vines wrong, but even after I got used to how they worked, it was still causing so many deaths. You could still tell they did as much as they could with the limitations they had, and it's really impressive, but the game design can be painful. The screen crunch doesn't help, but I can't really blame that on the game. Phones were just much smaller then. There's also the other versions of the game that I didn't try that would have less crunch. I'll have to get around to testing those versions out. Aside from that though, I think Chunan Daytime and Rooftop Run Daytime ended up being my favorite levels. Those 2 were genuinely enjoyable levels all throughout. They aren't perfect levels, but they ended up being the best showcases for level design in a mobile game like this. I really vibe with the visuals, by the way. Early mobile games have a look that I love, and it's fun seeing how they translated certain things into a device with this little power. The locations of Unleashed are translated into the style so well. They're not super detailed, of course, but it's easily recognizable what location you're in, and they have this pretty cozy vibe to them. Sonic's sprite kind of feels like the advanced sprite mixed with something new, and it's really charming. It feels like looking into this alternate alternate universe where Unleashed came to the GBA or DS, and it really makes me wish we got something like that alongside this version of the game. I didn't really get a chance to hear the soundtrack much. Music would play for around 3 to 5 seconds at the start of each stage, only to stop playing afterward. The only exception to this was the final boss, where the Endless Possibility remix played for like a minute before stopping. I think this is just because of the version of the game I played, since each version plays the music differently. Aside from that, what I heard, it's just Unleashed's music but crushed down heavily. And aside from that, that's really it. There's not much to say for such a small game like this. Despite the game not being amazing or anything, it was neat playing it after wanting to try it out for so long, and I can appreciate how ambitious it was for a mobile game in 2008. It brought me back to a long gone era for mobile devices, and it gave me a lot of nostalgia. I also think I want to eventually cover more Java Sonic games that I heard of back in the day, because there's so much out there to look at. I'd love to look at games like the original Sonic Jump, Shadow Shoot, and even the Java port of Sonic Advance. Maybe I can even cover some stranger ones like Sonic Cricket, I guess. But I'll save that for another day.